Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Corey and this used to be Cosmocraft Creations. We're going to get into all of that today, as well as touching on some Knights Templar facts. So if that interests you, then stay tuned. Hello everyone, it has been quite a while since I've uploaded to this channel, and I want to explain to you guys where I've been, what I've been up to, and what my plan is for this channel going forward. So in order to do that, I do need to do a brief overview of my history so that it all kind of makes sense a little bit. There's a lot more to it than what I'm going to tell you, but I'm trying to keep it short, sweet, and simple. So about 10 years, around 2012, my life changed dramatically. I'm not going to get into all those details, but before that I was a very spiritual person, and this year really solidified my spiritual beliefs. Moving forward, my health started to deteriorate. I've had some health conditions for quite some time. They were manageable up until this point, but then they started to go downhill. During this time, I discovered makeup. It was a huge outlet for me. I started making videos. I did a few weddings, some parties for friends, some photo shoots. It was a lot of fun. I started making videos on YouTube revolving around this, and I was also vlogging during that time. And I think the video making process itself was what I really enjoyed. Not that I didn't enjoy the makeup or the vlogging. It was all a lot of fun, but just something about making videos has always kind of been a passion of mine. So I did that for a little while. It was a lot of fun, but eventually my health started to deteriorate again, and from there I found resin to be my new outlet. It was so much fun creating with resin, but my health was still not in the best place, unfortunately. But I did decide to start making videos again. So I was on a different platform making videos, enjoying myself, and then I discovered energy healing. It made a huge difference with the few techniques that I had learned. I implemented them into my daily life, and the results were absolutely, truly amazing. So because I was feeling so good, I decided to start making TikTok videos and bring that work to YouTube. So my plan with this channel originally was to make resin crafts tailored to the stories that I was telling about ancient civilizations and the darker side of history, just everything that I'm intrigued by. So around this time, I ended up getting the virus, and as a result from that, I lost my sense of taste and smell. Things that I typically would enjoy, like chocolate, strawberries, watermelons, cooking with onions and garlic, all of it was ruined, including resin. It didn't matter what type of precautions I took, wearing a mask, covering my clothes, changing my clothes right after. The smell would stick with me for a good day or two, and I just couldn't get past it. So being that I had all of this time on my hands, I started to dive deeper into some of the things that I was intrigued by. I earned a few certifications in things like hypnotherapy, healing touch, Reiki, meridian therapy, reading the Akashic records, spiritual coaching, all sorts of things. And so that all kind of brings us back to today. I am working on building a website and a business revolving around all of these things. I have a few clients that I've been working with in my inner circle, but I'm so excited to expand my reach. And the funny thing too is that all of this stuff that I'm looking into, it's like a giant circle. Everything just keeps coming back around to itself, and it's so fascinating to discover all of these synchronicities in all of the information that I'm diving into. And that brings us to the topic of discussion for today, which is the Knights Templar. Before we get into the Knights Templar, I do first want to talk about the Gaia Network. Now, I'm not affiliated with the Gaia Network by any means other than paying for my monthly subscription, but Gaia is like the Netflix of spirituality. It's an amazing platform. You do have to pay for it monthly like Netflix or Hulu, things like that, but they also have a free YouTube channel, so you can find a lot of really interesting videos on their free YouTube channel. So all of the information that we're going to be talking about today comes from a new show on the Gaia Network called Into The Vortex with Jimmy Church. And in the very first episode, he interviews a man named Timothy Hogan. Now, Timothy Hogan is a Grand Master of the Knights Templar. He's also an esoteric expert and an author. Now, I'm not good at retaining information, so if you see me looking down, I do have my notes sitting in front of me, so that might be a thing during this video. But one of the books that Timothy Hogan writes is called The Way of the Templar, a manual to the modern Knights Temple. In this book, he says, "The Templar order still thrives today. Many traditions claim to be Templar or claiming lineage or history. Some of these are quite legit and quite ancient. Others are more recent innovations." Now, in this book, he doesn't exactly dissect the different claims of these groups, but he does focus on the main teachings of the Templar order. Now, historians believe that the order started around 1118, but it actually started as early as 1096, prior to the involvement with Jerusalem or the Roman Catholic patronage. They started out independent of the church. The Templars also largely came out of Gnostic traditions, like the Albigensians in southern France. They were also connected to Middle Eastern groups like the Druze and the Sabines. And at the time, these groups were actually preserving and translating ancient texts from Rome and Greek, things like Plato. And these texts alluded to previous technological civilizations pre-cataclysm. The Templars also worked with Friends Rashi of Troyes, a medieval rabbi, and Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, both who passed on the ancient knowledge and locations of certain artifacts that were hidden all around the world. To this day, the traditions of the Templar remain the same, despite their brief allegiance to the Catholic Church. They have been forced to adapt to certain cultures and countries that they've lived in, but at their core, their purpose has remained the same. The Templars are dedicated to preserving ancient traditions, and they believe that everyone has a spark of divine within them. And through our own efforts, we can attain the knowledge of the divine. They strive to preserve the rights and the freedoms for people to be able to look into this stuff and explore it all on their own. They believed that we didn't need priests or the powers to be to access this information, as it was our God-given right. The Templars also knew that by understanding these ancient mysteries, it could help bring them out of the Dark Ages. They searched tirelessly around the world, comparing stories from different cultures like the Torah and the Old Testament, looking for evidence of a primordial existence prior to the deluge. In their research, they discovered Atlantis, and they believed that after the fall of Atlantis, the survivors split off and it settled into different pockets around the planet. They set out to discover these different pockets and find what they had preserved, figure out what their thought processes, their philosophy, what their religions were like in these old civilizations. But most importantly, they were interested in this ancient technology. They had found allusions of technology in the Bible and in the Torah. Things like the Ark of the Covenant, a powerful object capable of very mysterious effects. It could cause illnesses and very strange deaths. In their searches around the world, the Templars found many things of interest. Among these were a series of boxes that matched the description of the Ark of the Covenant. They found that these same boxes were depicted on the walls of Egypt. Edfu has representations of these origins coming from Atlantis. Templars also discovered a strange and mysterious substance that was produced alchemically, which they believed was to be the traditional mana. The Templars discovered this alchemical process first in Jerusalem, and further evidence of these high-tech traditions going back to Atlantis in Egypt. Egypt was one of the centers of the preservation efforts. The Templars also discovered a large number of holy people's tombs, which they collected and brought back to Europe as part of the preservation. However, some of the discoveries of the Templars went against the mainstream narrative of the church. As mentioned before, the Templars did start out independent from the church, with a brief patronage to the Roman Catholic Church. In 1307, the King of France and the church collaborated together to suppress the Templars. This started on Friday the 13th, inducing a superstition of it being an unlucky day for centuries to come. For 7 long years, the Templars of France were hunted down, tortured, and burned at the stake. The Templars knew that they needed a way to keep their knowledge and their artifacts safe. Europe was under complete control with absolutely no freedom of thought, religion, or assembly. Luckily for them, in their travels, they discovered a new land, which we now call the United States. They established connections with the natives here, brought their artifacts over, and set up a system for preservation. Certain U.S. tribes are still known to protect and uphold this contract today. The Templars started bringing over vaults of knowledge and artifacts as early as the 1200s, sailing from their ports in France and Portugal. They wanted to create a new Jerusalem here. By the 1350s, the Templars had mapped out the entirety of the northern Americas. The Kensington runes were allegedly discovered in central Minnesota in 1898. It is said that this stone is a land claim, signifying that this land had already been mapped out and discovered. Some of the things that were in these vaults were a series of 6 different arcs that the Templars had rediscovered. And today we know of at least 4 more, bringing the total up to 10 arcs. The original 6 arcs that were recovered were brought back to Europe via Lebanon. They were held at the tomb of Hiram for a little while before first being brought to Portugal, then to Scotland, and then to the US. I'm sorry if the angle keeps changing. First my SD card filled up and then my battery died. So anyways, moving on. So these arcs are found depicted on the walls of Egypt as well as mounds of manna. In Edfu, we find a depiction of a pharaoh holding a staff who seems to be controlling this levitating box that we think is an ark. This ark has a cartouche around it, creating a field and signifying importance. In Dendra, we find 4 of these arcs depicted on the walls with energy connecting out the tops of them. Now it's believed that one of these arcs became the Ark of the Covenant in the Hebrew tradition. It's also thought that Moses may have stolen one of these arcs, and that's why Pharaoh chased him out of Egypt, trying to retrieve this ark. Now, traditionally, it is said that inside of the ark were the 10 commandments as well as a bowl of manna. But Moses also had the tablet of testimony. And alchemically, this tablet of testimony is supposed to be an emerald tablet. More on that later. Now, these arcs are said to be a pre-cataclysmic technology, believed to be used as an energy conductor to broadcast energy, kind of like Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. They used a rod referred to as Aaron's rod in the Bible as a grounding rod. So what they would do is take one end of the rod, place it into the ground, and then they would set the other end of the rod, well, you'd think they'd have to kind of throw it on there, but the other end of the rod would be on the ark, and this would help ground all the energy around the ark. Now what's really cool is that the ark's dimensions could fit exactly into the sarcophagus of the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. What's really cool about the Great Pyramid is that it naturally conducts a ton of static electricity. If you were to stand on top of the Great Pyramid with a wet rag stuffed inside of a glass bottle, sparks would emanate from this glass bottle. So if you were to take an ark with a super highly conductive substance like manna and put it inside of the ark and then put the ark inside of the pyramid, it has the capability of resonating energy throughout the surrounding area. And it's believed that that's exactly what it did. It broadcasted energy to the surrounding temples. These surrounding temples had these little butterfly clips on them. And evidence shows that these butterfly clips were once made of metal. So the idea behind it is that they could take these ancient technologies, plug into these butterfly clips, and program or give life to certain devices. Just like how we would charge our phone or our computers today. There's also evidence that this technology originated in Atlantis, which is really cool. Another fascinating thing about the Great Pyramid is that it's actually the center of all the land masses of the world. So it's very feasible to think that this Great Pyramid could have generated enough power to power the entire planet. At least until the arcs were removed anyways. Now before we move on, it's important that we mention the Holy Grail. One of the first ever Grail stories were written in a medieval text called The Parzival by Wolfram von Eschenbach. Now this medieval text was written in the 1200s, and it literally says that the Templars are in charge of guarding the Holy Grail. It also says that if a Templar should become a ruler of a foreign people, he should give them their God-given rights. This is the first time in history that it had ever been suggested that the people had God-given rights. Typically, it was thought that the rights were given by either the church or the king. This text says different. It is said that we all come from the divinity and that the divinity transcends all, which is very significant to the Templars' core beliefs. Now, the Holy Grail has been associated with many different things. It's been said to be related to the bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. It's also been described as a stone that could burn the phoenix to ashes after it's been resurrected. It is also said that the Holy Grail is an emerald that fell from the crown of Lucifer during a war in heaven, and that two neutral angels brought this to earth. Now, all of these are actually alchemical metaphors for the emerald tablet, which, ironically enough, isn't actually emerald at all. It's actually a copper acetate, which is a crystallized copper, and from this substance, you can actually extract monoatomic atoms, or monoatoms. And the tablet itself actually contains instructions to an alchemical process. After returning to Europe, the Templars were tasked with building some of the first cathedrals in France, and they chose to represent the alchemical process of manufacturing mana on these cathedrals. In this image, we see what is called an athanor. This was an alchemical oven used to create mana. The figure is seen pulling a salamander out of the bottom of this oven, representing the alchemical language. By breaking down the word salamander into Sol and Mander, we get a much different meaning. Sol meaning salt, and Mandra meaning stable, stable salt. And stable salt is what could be extracted from the oven once all of the materials had been calcinated down. When mana is manufactured, it develops into a conical shape, as we see in this figure here. Inside of this glass jar, we see a white substance at the bottom forming into a cone shape, and this is the traditional mana. In Egypt, we find a depiction of Osiris holding the traditional cone of mana. In this depiction, he's offering the mana to the one who wears the plumes of Amen on his head. Besides its healing properties, mana is known as a superconductive substance. The arks were developed to hold the mana, and Solomon's temple was developed to hold the arks. The mana goes into the ark goes into the temple. And as we mentioned before, these arks are actually an energy source that can produce a tremendous amount of energy with mana placed inside. The word and substance mana is actually found in many, many ancient civilizations all across the world. We of course find mana in the Torah and in the Old Testament, but we also find it in places like ancient Sumer. In ancient Sumer, they used what was called Graal, to produce shamana, mana, shamana, and shamana was used to help with the Anunnaki gods' flying crafts. In the Vedic texts from pre-cataclysmic times, we find the word Vimana. Vimana were the flying crafts of the gods. In the Polynesian cultures, mana is known as a force of nature that energy can be extracted from. In Gnostic traditions, like the Albiginians, they practiced a ceremony called the Mani Sola ceremony. This was a communion rite where they use a substance called mani. This substance in ancient science can be found in a number of other places around the world, and it all leads back to the Ark, which is just one of many things that the Templars were able to rediscover and preserve. And of course, all of this stuff is stored in the vaults of the Templars. Throughout the centuries, the Templars have kept the location of these vaults a secret, but to this day, they still know where they are and who is protecting them. Now, the Templars don't claim any of these relics as their own. They only protect them. They believe that everything that they have found belongs to all of humanity, not just certain power structures. The Templars would love to disclose all of this information to the public. However, it will rewrite history as we know it. And as we have seen from the past, the powers that be are very threatened by the work of the Templars. The suppression of the church and the monarch of 1307 was absolutely brutal. And it's a good example on how the powers that be try to maintain a certain narrative to keep control over the people. From the very beginning, the Templars knew that a future generation would understand and appreciate all of the relics and knowledge that they have tried to preserve over the centuries. But in order to do so, we're forced to look at things in a different way, see things in a new light. This, of course, can be a threat to certain power structures that we have in place now. So in order for disclosure to be possible, people need to come to an acceptance of this ancient civilization that is more advanced than we are now, and that personal salvation is obtainable through one's own efforts. We also need to come to a place of unity. The powers that be like to keep us separate because it's easier to control different groups that are fighting against each other than one group that is united for the same cause. So anyways, guys, that is my spiel about the Knights Templar. I hope that you enjoyed this little video, and I'm really looking forward to making new videos in the future. Again, all of this information came from the Gaia show Into the Vortex with Jimmy Church. This is an interview done with Timothy Hogan. Very fascinating interview. I tried to pack as much information as I could into this video. So, like I said, thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye!